Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome back to another episode of Naked Sunday. I am your host, Caleb Nelson, and I have the incredible, the lovely Amanda Monnier on the podcast today. Amanda, thanks for joining the show.
Hi, Caleb. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to see what kind of magic we can make together.
Feeling is mutual. I'm excited today, as we were talking before we hopped on here. My voice is a little raspy. I'm excited to just shut my mouth and mostly just listen to what's going on in your world. I think many people are going to celebrate that because I can rant often. So this is a blessing in many, many ways for so many people. Um, if you have listened to any of the episodes of the podcast, I like to start my shows with why I appreciate my guest. And just a little bit of some of you, like your courage and your story and how you've kind of shifted from very different environments. I think that there's something very powerful beyond that within what you've done in your life. And I really admire your courage on top of the fact that you're just this really lovely, kind, inspiring person. Being that I've been on your podcast, I felt warm and welcome. I think there's something really humble and wonderful about you that I'm excited for people to just have that on showcase today. And so there's mostly I'm just trying to say thank you for being you today.
Oh, well, thank you for your kind words. And yeah, it's my intention to bring some of my wisdom. And I always say, like, take what resonates and leave the rest make it work for you. We're all on our own journey. So let's do this. Super, super excited.
Let's jump right in then. So share with the audience, because you know yourself better than I. Who are you?
I've always had a hard time, and maybe you can relate to this, funneling myself into a couple sentences. And maybe you even said this when I had you on my show, but in regard to at least this season of my life, I feel like for me, I've learned it's like seasons of my life, things shift. My name's Amanda. I am a fitness and nutrition coach supporting my boyfriend and I do this together. So we support men, women, couples on their fitness journeys. And a lot of it definitely comes down to the nutritional component. And so with that becomes releasing a lot of old habits and really stepping into that person that you know you're meant to be, the lifestyle you know you're meant to live, and letting go of like the old things that don't serve you anymore. So it's like I always say fitness and nutrition is just the vehicle to really unleash like that person who has maybe been hiding beneath the surface of the things that you've been conditioned to do or the way you've always done things, and you know it's time to make a change. Like I'm your person for that. So in regard to business, that is where I'm at in this season. I've made a big career change. It was, gosh, I think 3 or 4 years ago now, coming up on 4 years, actually. I left my career in law enforcement. So I had done that for about 6 years. I was a probation officer. And then I kind of had this moment where it was like a mic drop moment. And I was like, there's just something missing. And I feel like I have a ceiling in all these areas of my life, but life, like, really, I sense this like aspect of limitlessness on what I was able to accomplish. And so I quit my career. I sold my home. I knew I needed to be in Southern California. I moved to Southern California, since started a business, met the love of my life, and it's been bumpy. I'm not gonna say it's been all sunshine and fairy tales and rainbows, but I wouldn't have it any other way. And that's kind of the beauty of following those nudges, but also, embracing when the stuff does come up. It's like that's your chance to really lean into that even deeper and to become that version of yourself that you're meant to experience in this life.
That was a pretty good self introduction there. So be very proud of yourself. You fit it into several very eloquent sentences, and I appreciated that. Let me ask you this: what's it been like working with? I want to dive obviously a little more into that, but what's it been like working with your significant other?
I feel like for certain people it might not work, but for me, it has been one of the most rewarding experiences because it's
Hmm.
like you have different sides to a relationship. I feel like you have, at least for me, maybe you can second this, but you have that fun, playful, you have like the sexy, the loving, and then sometimes it's like you're building stuff together and you have common goals. And that's one thing that I've found to be really important in being in a relationship is like you have like those big things, you're on the same page, and building this business together. And also, other facets, like I actually just got my insurance license as well. My boyfriend owns an insurance brokerage, so I'm doing that secondarily. And for me, especially as a woman, I feel like being able to, trust his guidance and, take that feedback. And, also as like the feminine, having that creative, because I'm like always like, okay, what creative thing can I be doing? And so it's been a really beautiful balance of more that like kind of sound logical and then my creativity, bringing that into both of the businesses and then just watching things really shift. So it's actually, I feel, brought us closer.
Wow, I love that. I think creating something together inevitably either brings you closer together or brings you apart because you go, oh shit, we were not on the same page. But when you try to merge things, whether it's creating a home together, having a family, creating a business, that creative energy of like we're going to have a united vision and we're both exerting efforts and energies into that, things come into contact, and like ideologies and beliefs and things of that nature. That's really cool. What I also really appreciated is how I think there's a lot of struggles with people saying like I'm going to let my partner give me guidance or feedback, and some people think like that's being subservient. I see the other thing. I was like, if you like, how do you not trust your partner? Wouldn't they be best suited to observe the things that you're struggling with? I'd love for you to lean into that because I thought that was pretty, not only that was very mature, but also very profound that I think many people in this day and age struggle struggle with that single element right there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I could go down some like deep kind of rabbit holes and like more of that like subconscious piece around it. But
Please
I
do.
guess I'll back up. Yeah, I guess I'll back up. So for me, I wasn't always like that, especially, with the experiences I had, growing up. I was like kind of that woman, young woman that walked around like nobody mess with me, a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. And then I end up in law enforcement and it's kind of like exacerbating that a little bit. But I think part of what I've noticed, at least, is like this hardening of women and this hardening of the feminine to where it's like, and we see it on the mainstream a lot as well. It's like, oh, I don't need a man's help. We don't need men. Yes, in my opinion, yes, we freaking do. We need strong, capable, men with that masculine leadership in that sight, which I feel there's been just like this diluting of that kind of masculine essence and feminine essence in a lot of women are attempting to be men. And so for me, being able to sort of surrender into one, it's like I chose a person that I do trust and I do respect. And in addition to that, like trusting his guidance and his leadership, I have probably it's I would say since I kind of had my spiritual awakening, if you will, which has been in such like different layers. So initially, I would say probably 10 years ago, as I started to kind of peel back the layers of different experiences and patterns and trauma, we can label it whatever we want. It was dense stuff that I was holding inside of my body and it was coming out in my relationships with men. So I would attract these unavailable men. I would attract these relationships that just weren't, I just knew it wasn't the end all be all for what I was here to experience. And so while it was difficult, I was adamant that I was not going to be settling for these, even though sometimes, I stayed in some of them a little longer than I would have, knowing what I know now. But I can say through the awarenesses that I had and the healing, those like almost like the harshness in the feminine system, I feel like that can be what it comes down to because we all have different personalities. Like I definitely have a side to me that's a little bit more like also action taking. We all have both feminine and masculine elements to us. But I would say, to answer your question, in summary, I feel like there's just been this hardening of feminine women. And like it can be even an unconscious undertone of like, we don't need men. And that's simply not true.
I think there's a lot we can unpack on that. I especially think it's powerful coming from a woman to say that because most people, if those words were just rolling out of my face right now, like, oh, the patriarchy is coming out, like, da, 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 da. Like, no, No, like I'm a dude who's also very in touch with his feminine side. So all those things. And I think in this, and I'm going to shut up again in a second because I want to hear more of where you're going with that. Plus, my voice can't handle it. But what I've struggled with in my own life is we're going too heavy into one and then coming back to the masculine. Because I do think there is on both sides, there's a rejection of the self, like your true nature, going too far in the extreme of the other. But then you realize to have order and balance and harmony, you must come back closer to your true self. And as you were speaking to those things, I think of it the yin and the yang. And this is a friend of mine. She was in high school, actually. She shared this. She was a year older than me. So when she came back from college, I remember going for a walk with her. And she talked about it that way, like the yin and the yang, masculine, feminine energies. But it's not all of one. It's not just white on one side, black on the other side. It's like on the black side, there's that little white dot. On the white side, there's that little black dot. And we need to be able to understand that element, right? For the male, it has to be that other element. We have to understand that feminine energy. We can talk about feelings. We can emote. We need to, in fact, learn how to grapple with those. And on the other side, we like the masculine energy tends to be more order and structure and things of that nature, but it doesn't need to be too crazy of that. So I really appreciate how you said that. And I'm curious about like let's call it the spiritual awakening. I got it. And you said it was really, if I remember correctly, it was like kind of coming to a head from like when you were leaving law enforcement. That was when that was coming to a head. Like what was going on there with like what's the I think people don't understand what happens right when the quote unquote spiritual awakening, because that sounds very vague to people. What was that for you, and what did that enlighten you to, especially with you talking about that hardening of the feminine? I was so curious about that.
I agree with you. I think that with people say spiritual awakening is like, what does that mean? Because I feel like I've had like, I don't even know if I like that's just like the only term I know to use, but like I've had so many of them, right? And so I feel like for me to first of all, I'll explain it this way and then I'll go into like kind of what happened at that point. But it's like almost like meeting yourself at a deeper level every single time, because it for me, it's not about finding who you are, it's about remembering who you've always been. It's just been underneath all the shit that you've been told to believe about yourself. You've never actually lost access to that. It's just been veiled by the nonsense, right? It's been veiled by the trauma you're still holding in your body. It's been veiled by the things you've told to think and believe about yourself. But when the world got a hold of you, right? No one's been unscathed. So kind of backing up to that initial experience where I was like, I started like seeking, and it started as an external search, later turned internal. We can touch on that later, because it's like we can absolutely get support from healers, mentors, coaches, especially people who have been there, done that. But at the end of the day, I've found it's like, you know, I was just continuously meeting myself at a deeper level, as I mentioned. So when this initially happened, and sometimes we have events in our lives that will kind of activate or trigger, whatever word you want to use, these experiences. And so for me, I was probably a year or two in law enforcement, and I had been dating this guy, I think not too long, but a few months. And but the connection was in freaking sane. Like it was just this. Have you ever had that? If you're listening, like that sort of chemical reaction you have with, you know, a significant other. It's like you feel like you've known each other forever. Maybe you've known each other if you believe in past lives or whatever. But it was like that. It was intense. Like the hormones were just firing on all cylinders. And so it came to an abrupt stop, and it was because a bunch of stuff on both of our sides like surfaced from inside of us, whether, and oftentimes what this will look like is insecurities, emotions. You know, you have like after those several months, like maybe you're in a situation like this and you like have something come up and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not worthy of love, or I can't trust this person, or fill in the flavor, right? The stuff comes up. And after that point, it's like we ran from it and we ended the relationship, and I was just like left. I remember being like locking myself in my condo at the time for like 2 weeks straight. We were supposed to go on vacation together, and it was like all this darkness had come up to the surface, like this. And really, I'll kind of sum it up in the way that I can explain it to where it might be a little more digestible. It's like all that ickiness and unprocessed emotion and stories that had been trapped in my body because at the time when it initially happened, I didn't know how to process it and didn't have the tools. That was up to the surface. And it was like time to take a look at it. I knew it was time to take a look at it. So I started searching for support and research, like researching things because I didn't know what was happening. I was like, why is this? Like, it felt like all the heaviness that I've been holding, it's like I couldn't escape it this time. It wasn't an option. It wasn't an option to go like get on a dating app and go find someone else, right? To put a band-aid on a bullet hole. It was time to really face myself. And so that was the initial experience that I can remember. And then it continued to kind of come in waves, which I actually don't believe has to happen. I think we're all on our own journey and our souls are here to learn different things and experience different things. But from what information I now know about the human body, and even we've not even scratched the surface on the human body as far as like what really the body is about. I'm like, I feel like I know from my experience, a percentage more than the average person, but like, I feel like I've just scratched the surface as well. But we can go into that if you'd like, but I'll kind of leave it there. But yeah, it was definitely no running this time.
Mm. I love what you're sharing there, especially it's more like you can't really run from yourself. It's coming. And I think it's also inevitable. I think what you brought up, like typically things like triggered like a life event, usually a breakup, a death, an accident, physical trauma, something kind of stops you in your tracks, and it's like a weird checkpoint. Go, how far away from the real you are you? And as much as those moments are so painful, and you're like, that sucked. From what it sounds like the journey you've gone on and where you're at right now, it was almost inevitable. It had to happen so that you could feel things you feel now and the type of relationship you have now. In a strange way, you're like, well, I'm really grateful it happened, which that's
Yeah,
a hard
you
one.
might not be grateful at the time, but after you don't, after those triggers and those emotional responses no longer control your life, you'll be happy that you felt. It's really so simple. It's like you just gotta acknowledge the things, feel the things, and move the things out of your body. But we're taught to hold it. So like it's like most of us are walking around so contracted, like constricted. Therefore, energy is not able to move in our bodies. Therefore, we're repeating the same things again and again because that's what we're I don't teach the law of attraction like it's often taught, but that's your point of attraction because that's your frequency. That's what you're connected to. And you forgot, again, going back to like who you truly are. So it's like you're veiled from your true God self, from your true divinity, from
Mm.
that being one with it, because that's the lessons in separation that we've been taught and conditioned to believe we're separate from. You have to do XYZ to be good enough. If you do XYZ, then you're going to get crucified, and even metaphorically speaking. If you speak your truth,
Mm.
you this bad thing's going to happen. That's been subliminally conditioned into this, some people call it the false matrix, whatever we are living in, that's been infused into the programs here. And so that's why we all have our different flavor of challenges, is because we've been that's what's been the focal point and the program we've been running. So we can all kind of write down our different core challenges, and that is not you, and it feels real. It feels like it's you, but that's the illusion.
Well, what I was thinking about as you're sharing that, and you had earlier said, um, you work on fit in your intro, like professionally, I work on fitness and nutrition.
Yeah.
And I know you had talked about when I first went on your podcast, like I've worked back towards like fitness and nutrition as a thing when we ever introduced, because we talked a little about spirituality. And you're like, hey, is that gonna be okay? Obviously, what I'm so fascinated by, and what you just were bringing up, is in an interesting way, law of attraction. When you feel physically out of balance, it's almost like it's time for me to be attracted back to myself. Like the body is telling you something's out of whack. Uh, Tell me a little bit about that kind of, because I feel like, and correct me if you felt differently, because I've struggled with this during the past several years of my life, was like, well, the real thing we need to work on is all this stuff. But what people understand from a base level standpoint, it's like I got to lose some weight. I want to not be in pain. I want to be a little stronger, and I should probably eat a little better.
Mm.
And oddly enough, I was talking a little about this yesterday with my brother-in-law. It's like the on the surface we're talking about food, but the reality is we got to address all this stuff. I'm not even really sure where I want to how I'm trying to access this question, but just like
Mm.
how has that balance been for you? Because knowing like, hey, we got to deal with some practical and marrying all these other things. What's that been like and that understanding? Because I don't think enough people understand like your body is telling you that this other stuff is actually happening.
Yeah, and that's the interesting part because it's like also meeting people where they're at. But I do feel like at that deepest of levels, we know this stuff. It's like maybe you can't put it into the words where you're making the connection, right? But the best way I can describe it is because there's a lot of people that it's like their sole goal is leaving the human body. And maybe that's no judgment if that's what you want to experience, like in the airy fairy realms, whatever. I spent a lot of time in that when I kind of dabbled in like I kind of went through some more, airy fairy experiences. And I was, I look back and I'm like, oh, that was so cute. But really what it always come back to what I've always come back to is the body, right? The body is your vessel. It's if you don't have a body, you can't be in this experience. And so really starting at that foundational level, because people want to jump, like it's like you want to run before you can stand. You want to run before you can crawl. But the foundations are in your daily habits. It's in the patterns and it's in the way that you speak to yourself. It's in relationship, how you're in relationship with yourself, how you're in relationship with your body, how you're in relationship with food. Because again, foundationally, if we don't have a body, we can't be doing this human experience. So obviously the fitness and nutrition is like a sidebar in regard to how important I feel it is in everyday life. Like there's a lot of, coaches that'll be like, oh, as long as it fits your macros or, as long as you're making baby steps. I'm never going to be the coach that recommends putting poison in your body if it fits your macros. Like I'm just never going to be that person. Because I know foundationally that everything carries an intelligence and everything carries a code. And so, yeah, it might fit your Diet Coke might fit your macros, but there's toxic shit in Diet Coke. And when you're putting that into the body, you're putting a specific instruction into the body. And half the time we don't know what that is. And so if you're like, okay, what is this lady talking about? If you pause right now and check in with your body and check in with the way that your physique looks and how you feel on a daily basis, how's your sleep? How's your hydration? Those are benchmarkers and feedback from your body on how close you are to your natural state. It's so foundational and so basic, but we've gone so far off into, oh, take a diet pill, I think people are even pricking themselves with these weight loss pills now. One of my clients mentioned it. I'm like, well, I will never, ever recommend that. So I don't know if you're asking me or not, but that's a big no. But again, and you can always be checking in with yourself and with your body because it's giving you feedback. And that can come as symptoms of different organs, tissues, glands, giving you, symptoms of dis-ease or illness. Like that's a place to look at. And for me, I think I mentioned before we got on this, we hit record, we were talking about some stuff going on with the throat. Like last week, I was purging something out of my right tonsil. I knew it wasn't like something where I was getting sick. I just knew my body was releasing dis-ease. I knew it was old. So you can get to the point to where you are so in tune with your body that you understand these types of things. But that's the first relationship. And we've gone so far away from it that we have to have 19 other people tell us what's going on with us. And we have no idea. And that's where we feel helpless and where feel like we have no control over something that is so sacred and so innate is our relationship with our body, our vessel. And again, that's going back to why, I have clients that are like, well, can't I just, eat the cheeseburger or the fries? I'm like, you can do that. You can totally make that decision. And I'm not saying that, we can't indulge, but also I'm very, I always go back to food is fuel. And so why have we been conditioned to indulge in poison and make that societally acceptable and normal? That's why we're seeing so many symptoms of the way we treat our physical vessels, our bodies. We're seeing it every day. It's a norm to have heart disease. It's a norm to have high blood pressure. It's a norm to have diabetes. It's a norm to have PCOS. Like, I'm not here for that at all. So I don't know if that answered your question. I went off on a little bit of a tangent, but
I think you gave me a better answer than where I even was trying to go with the question because I think I was already pretty I was just more curious about just even the thoughts about blending those two, which you eloquently did there. I think so many people struggle to rectify the idea like, no, this body is sacred. The body is a temple.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I think what you really said is like your body's expressing your current relationship to yourself. What is it? Do you think it's denial? Is it fear? Is it what do you think is getting people to be so decidedly dissociated from themselves? Like what is like the common theme you typically see?
Well, I think that there's many different things that can be going on for many different people, but again, at that foundational level, it's, if you were to like take an inventory of your day, right? How, for those of you listening, how often are you spending time pausing and just getting into your body? Or thanking your body? Like it can be so simple as like we take for granted the fact that we have legs. For those of us that have legs, we take for granted the fact that we have clean water, and we bitch about how we have to drink a gallon of water a day. It's like you have access to clean water. So I feel like it's, our society, we have, it's like, everything's moving so quickly. It's, you got all the consumerism stuff, you got just, all these tens of 20 things on your to-do list for the day, and then we make excuses that we don't have the time to move our body, and we're sedentary, and then we don't have the time to meal prep or to source healthy food. And so we make all these excuses, but it's like, it's because we don't value it. Like we don't have that, that deep cultivated relationship. It's like our relationships grow when we put attention and effort into this. I was talking to Luke yesterday because I was, reflecting on a couple clients that I'm like, gosh, I just, it's like I'm attempting to, coach them through their weight loss journeys. And it's like, I thought about this. I'm like, I wonder, if it was like in 2 months, if you lost those 15 pounds, you'd get $1 million. They'd figure out a way to lose the 15 pounds, right? So it's really, I feel like what it comes down to is what we're putting our attention on and what we're valuing. And I think that there's just such a disconnect from most people in their body that they have forgot to value it. And then it's reactionary. And so then it's like, oh gosh, I have a symptom of XYZ, and now I got to go to the doctor and get a pill for it. Rather than if you had just been mindful or more mindful of where you're sourcing your food, put a little energy and effort into it. I guarantee you, and we talked about this, I think you recommended an app for this, but if you go and see how long you spend on social media, add that with how long you're spending on streaming services like Netflix every week, add that on with how long you're spending on the phone, maybe gossiping or talking or whatever, like that could potentially be a solid 10 hours. I'm going to even bet on the over of time that you are allocating to things that aren't serving you, when you can flip that script and like choose it is a choice. That's what it comes down to. You have to choose it. But that's just what I've noticed, is that it's just not something that people are bringing their conscious effort and awareness into, and so it becomes this reactionary thing. And it's like I go back to the relationship piece, because let's say if you have a significant other and you don't acknowledge that person for a week, you're probably going to be pretty like, what the heck? So it's the same thing with your body and with yourself. And that's where it starts. And then you can give from your overflow.
Mm. God, I'm just loving this conversation right now. Well, you brought up the word relationship a couple times in there, and what that made me come back to is when you started this, and I actually didn't know you worked with couples.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's one of my favorite things is couples together. Oh my gosh, it lights me up.
okay, dive into all of that,
Oh,
because
yeah.
I wrote a thing a couple of years ago, grow together or grow apart. And
Yep.
just, you know what, I'm going to shut up. Just take it away. Just like dive into that.
I mean, well, it starts with the relationship that I have with my man. We train together 5 to 6 days a week. We're in the gym together. Of course, if our schedule doesn't match up, like we're not codependent in that way. We could train by ourselves, but it's something that it's like it it's hard to explain if you don't experience it, but it's like a way in which we grow together and build each other up and challenge each other and push each other and love on each other. And so it's like we have that. The couples that have joined our program together, it's like another, again, it goes back to that supporting one another, being on the same page. I found for clients who aren't having that support, like we had I'll give you an example. We had a client who was interested in our program. She was a yes when she was on the phone, gave the whole, I got to check with my husband, came back, oh, my husband doesn't want me to join it. She had a solid probably 80 pounds to lose. Like she was not living a healthy lifestyle. And because her husband wasn't on the same page and wasn't supporting her, he essentially, I'm going to say, like, he stole that opportunity from her, and she chose to allow that to happen. And so it's like, well, then, a year from now, she's going to be in the same spot that she is now. Chances are, most likely, because if she's probably hasn't taken action on her own yet, she probably needs that support and accountability from someone else to provide her the map. So it's like, it can be twofold, where we found when couples aren't on the same page and supporting each other, it really can make it difficult. It's like, if someone's a drinker and you're not a drinker, and it's like you're trying to stay sober, and the person's like, hey, we'll just take a couple shots. It's, you have to have a little more willpower, and you're just not on the same page as far as lifestyle. It's a lifestyle thing to train, eat healthy, have that mindset, that solid mindset. So I would say that I feel can sometimes make or break a relationship, depending on how, because when it comes back to food, we talked a little bit about food, but when it comes back to food, food is attached to very social things in many cultures, right? Like we eat over food. It's like when we're sad, we eat icky food, right? We got to fill that up with, ho-hos and ding dongs and ice cream and all that stuff. There's such emotional components that are tied to food. And so it can really, add different challenges to a relationship if you don't have the support from your significant other. And if you're not doing it together, because one person's getting in and out and the other person's having chicken, rice, and veggies, that it creates, for me, it's just created this special bond. And it's like, it helps when, I don't really have icky food cravings, but it helps just knowing that that's just part of your daily life and you're doing it together, because it's the best lifestyle choice and the best for your body as well.
I resonate with everything you just said there because I don't think enough people understand that. You brought it up about the drinking. If your friends only know how to hang out at the bar, but you're trying not to drink, and that's a weak point for you, chances are you're going to have to change your friends group
Yeah.
because they're valuing that. And I think a very hard, you've obviously heard this, but I think people online I'm always surprised when people haven't heard these kinds of things. I'm like, these are staples, but changing somebody's diet is like changing somebody's religion, because everything you just mentioned right there, your values show up on the plate. And in a family setting, like you're buying one set of groceries theoretically, unless you're a competitive athlete and things are getting a little bit like, but even that necessitates a different type of conversation. But like, you're like, unless you're going to short order cook for everybody in the family, and I've seen it in like parents trying to make their kids 1,000 different meals and they're just angry at their kids all the time. Well, you chose to buy fucking, I saw this one thing was like chicken tenders and McDonald's fries and like tortilla, then like you probably saw the one I'm talking about. I
Yeah,
saw
I
that.
was like,
And
oh my gosh. And people are
I
like,
feel
stop
like
food shaming. I'm like, that's not food. You can't food shame when it's not food. Show me someone's fridge. I will tell you, like, I will be able to tell you a lot about that person.
1,000%. And the sad, scary part, and I'm sure you've seen this back in my first job, we did a kind of a series. We called it Home Invaders, and we should have asked people before, but we would show up at clients' houses. In the beginning, it was like we made sure like we chose clients that we know could hang, and they didn't know. We just knocked on the fucking door, and we walked in. And we're like, time to check your fucking pantry,
Oh my gosh,
and
Caleb, I think we need to do a reality TV show. You and I, we're gonna just go into people's houses, go into their pantries and their fridges, and just throw all the shit they shouldn't have in their way.
well, it's more even the, I lend my like. I like a good cheeseburger every now and then. Like I'm not going to say I'm not, and I love ice cream. Like that's never going outside of my life ever again because I just deny my. But the point is, and I have my wife and I have this very conversation, is that's not what comes into the household. We can have it, but it has like it's there's more steps to getting it. It's harder. It's not convenient in our space, in our everyday life. We would have to think about it. We have to think about it. Is it a special occasion? Like what's going on here and what are we really thinking about? As opposed to I'm craving something right now because I'm really just emotional and I'm tired and cranky and I just want to stuff like half a pint of ice cream in my face. Those are just two very different ways of, and I'm sure you've seen this whenever you've looked in people's pantries. And sadly, most people think like they'll tell you like, "Oh, I eat healthy," and you look into it, and again, I'm not on the, I'm not somebody who goes good or bad. It's but the chances of these types of foods that are highly palatable, highly caloric, like easily ingestible and addicting, like you can easily. It's much harder to crush a bag of broccoli than it is a bag of chips. Like it's way fucking harder. And
Nobody's gonna. I've never heard of anybody just sitting there crushing a bag of broccoli when they're having like going through a breakup. Could you imagine if that was the thing? You're going through a breakup and you're just sitting there with an open bag of broccoli and you're just mowing down the broccoli.
right.
Nobody ever, right?
It's gonna have to
Well,
turn
that's what
into a
it comes
meme.
back to with the food. I feel like food is one of, if not the most addictive substance on the planet, collectively speaking. And so for some people, like you can go out and have a cheeseburger, right? Because you live an overall, like your lifestyle and you're making a conscious decision. Whereas, I try to share with my clients, it's like almost like giving just a sprinkle of like dope to a druggie because you have a food addiction. There's a difference. And it might sound kind of harsh, but some people need that cold stop in order to be able to just cut themselves off and make a conscious decision to get on a plan and get some structure in their lives. And it's not forever. That's why I tell people, I'm like, it's not forever, but if you have 100 pounds to lose, it's probably not a good idea to let yourself sprinkle in some, fries and burgers every now and again, because chances are you're going to have a more difficult time stopping unless you just stick to the plan. That's just my personal opinion watching, different variety of clients. And then it's like, and then again, it's not going to be like that forever to where you can now consciously make a decision to go have that slice of pizza.
Well, not to mention to acquire said fries or pizza or whatever, it's more you had to go to the place to go get it. And you're gonna put yourself in the environment that you don't know how to handle yourself in it. It's not like to you, it's not safe in the way that like you feel comfortable in it, but you're not actually internally safe. You're being bombarded with all your stuff. And if you feel emotionally distraught, it's more than likely gonna win out on the things.
Yeah.
Again, if you have a better relationship with yourself and once a year you went and had your pizza, like that's a very different conversation. So I love that you brought that out there. I think what you highlighted there is more the importance of the type of conversation you're having with somebody, as opposed to like you'll never have it again. It's we need to try this for a little bit so you can, and you will use the word conscious. I think that was a very important word for people to understand the conscious consumption of food, where 99% of people, I would say, are mindlessly consuming media, information, noise from their family, but ultimately food is it's just another thing on the list of the things that are mindlessly being consumed. And as much as somebody thinks it's healthy, that's probably compared to their current peer group and compared to the last time they ever checked. They're not even aware because they're like, I don't feel like complete garbage compared to yesterday, but over compared to like 5 years ago when you're in the best shape of your life, you actually do feel like garbage. Your body just said, we're just kind of getting used to this because you're still trying to function the rest of your life. It's not all the fire alarms going off right now. But I thought that was so important
Yeah.
that you brought
Yeah.
that up.
I'd like to mention too, when it's like when you're going to consume these things, you're not actually, what you're actually feeding are those old patterns. And so that's why sometimes I'll ask my clients, like, can we take a look at what is the deeper root of this thing? If you have challenges with food, and this can be on a large scale, which some people refer to as binge eating, this can be on a small scale. So it just kind of depends on each person and what you've been through. But most of the time, it's like you're not actually like your body's not actually asking for that thing. It's the old pattern in your body that is not resolved that is asking for that thing. So that could be like for example. Like maybe that's your inner 5-year-old that is asking for that thing because it's like you go to reach for chips or a specific carb because for some reason you associate with carbs with like, you know, family dinners and like when everybody was getting along and you had a lot of pasta and starches. And so it's like there's this unconscious association with whatever it is that is causing the thing. And or, you know, we could even take it so far as like, you know, maybe you even have like, because we all have parasites in our body, right? So I don't want to freak anybody out, but maybe you have like some parasites in your body and it's actually the parasites that are feeding on the sugar and the yeast and all the things. So you're feeling to eat this ice cream, but it's actually the parasites asking for the ice cream. It's not your body asking for the ice cream. So it can be multi-layered, but I found mostly it's these old patterns and these emotions. So you're actually feeding the emotion, you're feeding the pattern, or you're feeding some sort of inorganic thing that is in your body that needs to be flushed out of your body. And the starving of the thing is what makes you uncomfortable because the starving of the thing makes you face what's really going on. And sometimes we don't want to do that, but I could tell you that's the only way. What do they say? The only way out is through. That's the only way to be free of these things is to face them instead of fueling and feeding them.
What just came up was intentional fasting. And I think that what you're talking about there is important because I just was talking to somebody 2 days ago. They were thinking about doing a fast. And I was like, awesome. I think the biohacking culture right now is a little much with like IIF and this is the thing. I'm like, fucking cool. And
Yeah.
I roll my eyes at this because I was that guy.
Yeah.
So
Oh, we've all been there, right?
we've all, I think any fitness person has like gone down every one of those fucking rabbit holes and like you eventually go, okay, here's one more thing. I get it. I get what's happening, but as opposed to saying like, here's one of the many tools in the toolbox that you might be able to use. It's not what do they call it? Panacea. It's like it's not this one pill, magic pill that's going to solve all your problems. Just
Yeah.
give it 3 months and let's see where you're at. And some people, it does end up being the lifestyle they love to do. That's not what I'm saying. But have you ever done any extended fasting, like three,
You
7 days?
I was just gonna say, I actually, because what was coming up is like, if people really want to know what the secret is to all of this, it's consistency and discipline, and the daily habits that are going to build up to the result. It's not that one cheeseburger that you had in the month of March 2024. It's the 10 cheeseburgers you had, the lack of water that you had, the lack of sleep you had, the sedentary lifestyle. So it's not just that one cheeseburger that you had. And so to answer your question, I really haven't felt called and my body hasn't asked for. I'm very in tune with my body. Like there was actually one time last week because I'm in off season. I'm a bikini competitor, so I'm in off season right now. And so my body requires a lot of food. I'm eating a more than most men. And there was one night where my body was like, no, I could feel it was like, you're not eating, you're done for the day. And my body was asking for that. And I'm so in tune with my body that even though I hadn't, you know, hit, because I do track macros, I feel like one of the most valuable skills that one person can learn. And you don't have, doesn't mean you have to track forever, but I feel like it is one of the most valuable tools. So I didn't eat dinner that night is because I knew my body, it was right around the stuff when my stuff with my throat was going on. So what I believe was happening is that my body was requiring that energy to release the stuff that it was purging, the old energy it was purging out of my body. This is how intelligent our bodies are, you guys. When you were in your mother's womb, you didn't have to tell it, you didn't have to provide instructions on how the body was going to generate. It's the same damn thing right now. We've just forgot. The divine intelligence of your body knows exactly what to do, but you're not allowing that space and freedom because you're putting all these toxic codes. And so the body's spending all the time pulling out all the toxins from, you know, the burgers and the, you know, whatever else you're putting in it, the energy drinks, the donuts, the, you know, the coffee. And when people are like, oh, I love coffee. No, you don't love coffee. You love milk and sugar, unless you're drinking your coffee black. You don't love coffee. So anyways, but that would be yeah, another one of my rants, but I just feel so strongly about that and about, you know, we do need some massive shifts in our consciousness and our awareness around our bodies if we want to course correct this epidemic of disease that we have going on here.
Mm. Let's lean into the macros thing for a second then. I think Again, knowing when and how to use the tool is super important, because I know there's some people who are like, this leads to eating disorders. And I used to be at a place where like, cool, I could see how could happen. When people already are high strung, highly neurotic, highly track everything in their life, it's it's actually too much of a cognitive burden to add one more thing, especially if they haven't grappled with some of this spiritual, emotional, internal work. Got it. But from a practical sense, it is just accounting. That's all it is. And I think that what you brought up there, why it's a valuable thing, is you learn a lot about what you're consuming. And I think most people are like, oh, I eat good portions. I eat enough. I don't like, and then you go measure it. And did you ever have? I can't remember. I saw this meme once. It's like that feeling when you realize how much an actual serving of peanut butter is, and like the depression that everybody has when they're like, oh, that's nothing. It doesn't. Like, I'm having like 7 servings of peanut butter every time I sit down, and they're like, well, yeah, you're not actually accurately measuring the calories you're having. You think you are, but you're not actually doing it. Um, maybe I guess another great way to bring it to ask lean into this is like, how do you bring around the conversation of something like macros?
Yeah. So first things first, for those of you who don't know what macros are, I'm assuming if you're on this podcast, you have a general idea, but they're your proteins, your carbohydrates, and your fats. So those make up your macronutrients. You have micronutrients, which are all going to be your vitamins, your minerals. And so for people who have challenges with their food, it is a really important tool to be able to see what is going on and what you're consuming on a daily basis. Because again, if you have all these unconscious habits, and I hear this from most of my female clients, oh, I eat healthy. And then I take a look at what's in their food log and I'm like, okay, honey, we're gonna back up a little bit on, what everyone's definition of healthy is subjective, right? Based on their patterns. And so, when we have that data in front of us, especially if you're someone who's like, okay, I have a goal, I'm not at my goal, this is what's going on, then it's a way for us to use this form of structure to measure what's happening every day so that we can get you to the goal. Because if you're consuming, if you have no idea what you're consuming, and maybe say you're consuming 3,000 calories one day, you go to freaking cheesecake factory and get a trough of food, and then the next day you're eating 1,000 calories, and we're just up and down all over the place. We don't have a way to properly measure what's going on in the way that the body is responding to your food. And so that's why I share with clients, it's so important for us to be able to, again, if this isn't something you want to do forever, but if you have something, let's say you have a financial goal, but you have no idea what amount of money is coming in and going out, you're not going to be able to measure that goal and if it's happening. So it's not, I always say too, it's not about the weight. And most of the time I have my clients check in their first check-in. I'm like, stay off the scale for 2 weeks. You're not allowed on the scale, because it's not necessarily about the scale. It's about your body composition. So those are two completely different things. And so this allows us to measure this at a deeper level. So, and I always share this with people too. It's like, if you have a specific goal that in mind that you want for your body, maybe you want to lose 20 pounds and you feel like that'll, because it's not necessarily 20 pounds, it's how you're going to feel at that result of that physique. You're going to probably have more energy. You're going to feel more confident. You're going to have better daily eating habits. Maybe you're going to feel better naked. Like, there's so many different things that it's not just about the tracking. We utilize the tracking as a tool. And so for those of you who are new to it or interested in it, you can easily get started. The first thing I recommend is people download MyFitnessPal. There's a free version. Track your food for 7 days and take a look at what your habits are. Do you go nuts on the weekend? Do you undereat during the week? A lot of people too, it's like they won't have their first meal till 2 o'clock, but there's zero intention behind it. So it's really getting clear on what your habits are. And that's for the people who, have a specific goal in mind and want to, maintain healthier lifestyle choices.
Well, I think also from a, I'd love to get your take on this. I think the other side of it is there's a fear of being held accountable to the thing you say that you want. And if it's just a number and it's very obvious, as much people might not like the number, still the number, and the number doesn't care about your feelings. The number, hell, that being said, the number on the scale doesn't care about your feelings. It is what it is. And like, this is where we're at. obviously some of the work you were just talking about, the relationship to the self, like you are more than just a number, but the number is the number. That's a very hard balance of like how do we use both this masculine structure of accountability,
Yeah.
we think most of it, and then also how do we grapple with that emotional regulation and say like, but they're all like, how do you deal with the worthiness of still staying on the path? Like that's, I think there's something a lot in that.
Yeah.
What reflections do you have any around those kinds of concepts that come up with clients?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like, we have the data and then we have a person behind the data, right? So, like you were sharing, I feel that and I have this in my own areas. So, like fitness and nutrition, not a problem. To me, tracking macros is like brushing my teeth. But for, certain other things, like I personally don't love showing up on social media every day, posting content. Like that isn't something I've yet mastered. So I think, again, going back to that conversation of it being something that's important to us, like if, you getting healthy, actually getting healthy and taking the steps needed, if that's important to you, you're going to do it. And for some people, they need that accountability in order to have that structure held for them because they can't hold that tension themselves yet. And so for some of us who haven't yet, it's like we've all have probably, I'm sure everyone at least has a level of mastery of something in their life, right? And so for those of us who have challenges with other things, finding someone who can hold that tension and that structure for you, but that doesn't negate you having to put in the work. I can't feed you the food, like we can provide you the map. But if have a map with step by steps on how to get to New York from California and you zig when you should have zagged, you're going to maybe end up in Washington State. And then you're going to have a whole nother route to it, which there's not necessarily anything wrong with. That's the thing. It's like, I have had clients before say, I don't love going to the gym. I don't want to, and I'm not going to go. And I'm like, perfect. Like that's your decision. That is totally fine. I personally, from my own experience, the research I've done and how I know weightlifting, the benefits of weightlifting, I believe that it's something that is beneficial for everybody. Even down to like our bone density as we get older and the structure of our bodies being able to, like sustain weight on our body and build that, not even just muscle, but it trickles down on so many levels. But if someone doesn't want to and that's not their goal, like that's totally fine, right? So I think that, when it comes to people, you mentioned like the worthiness piece, it's like getting really clear on what it is you truly desire. And then also, we live in a physical reality. So there's going to be certain things that you have to actually take action on to bring that desired reality into the physical. And I found time and time again, it all comes down to consistently doing the correct thing, because it's like you can consistently, hop on the treadmill for an hour a day. But if you're a weight loss client, I would not recommend that. That's not how I would start my clients off. I would start you off with foundation would be your nutrition. I use cardio as a tool later down the line. Like maybe you can lose some of the weight, but I don't believe that that's the fastest way to results. And then it's like, let's say you're doing the hour on a treadmill and then you're coming home and you're eating Taco Bell. You may be doing what you think is the right thing, but it's like, it's not actually yielding the results. So consistently doing the activities, the daily activities that are going to compound into the results, because with something like this, it doesn't happen overnight.
Mm. I think something that was very important in what you said too is if somebody's not tracking something, then the analogy around the map I thought was really powerful. Like he zigged instead of zagging, like you might end up in the wrong state or whatever. Well, if you're continually at least tracking something or you're being held accountable to something, you could course correct faster.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that being something that people struggle with. Everything I keep like keeps resonating in the back of my mind is accountability. And I think deep down what I'm hearing, and I'd be curious to get your take on it and your thoughts, is that we have an inherently poor relationship with authority. And I understand why. like there's a lot of, if you feel like you've been burned 1,000 times, why are you going to feel like you can trust again on the next thing? Even if you know it's the thing you need, how do you choose what's right for you? Perhaps where I'm going with this is, how would somebody find the accountability that's right for them? Yeah, I guess that's where I'm at. I guess where I'm going with it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel from what I've learned, it's like, having that internal, it starts with the internal accountability. And then it's like, I feel like it can be amplified by hiring someone who is living the results, because I think we can all agree with the, coaching industries and just the readily available, there's so much information out there and there's a lot of theory. So for me personally, because I've invested over 6 figures in business mentorship and over the last handful of years, and I've invested a lot in myself, and there are moments where I'm like, damn it, like I've learned some very valuable lessons, but what I have now learned and always will go back to is there's a difference between theory and there's a difference between actual results in the physical reality. And one thing that I can, share, it's like it's twofold, I believe. So it's that you have to have that internal kind of good pressure, if you will, like that internal drive and that conscious decision. You have to be willing to put in the work, especially for someone like something like this, where it's like, this is fitness and nutrition, building a body. Like no one can do that for you. That's like, you can hire someone to run your ads. You can hire someone to build your business. You can hire someone to, make you food, whatever, but it's you for the fitness and nutrition stuff. You can't outrun that in any way, shape, or form. So first and foremost, I believe that it comes from that internal piece and like owning that and owning your responsibility in it. And then when it comes to the mentorship, again, there's a difference between theory and applied practical results. And so I feel like for anything, if you are making a decision on that, first and foremost, you have to have that internal drive. Maybe you don't know how to get there. Maybe you don't know how to have the map, but you have to have that willingness to put in the work that is required, because there's a lot of, again, fluff around that. And then secondarily, I would recommend hiring someone, like, I feel like you can kind of feel that resonance, right, with the right person. And then in addition to that, like that they're living it in their daily life. That is the biggest thing for me, because it'd be like hiring a homeless person to give you financial advice. Like, I don't, maybe there's like outliers, but I don't know in what world that would be a good idea, right? So hiring someone who's living it, who has results for themselves and who has guided others through the process, I feel is one of the biggest key pieces in making that decision on like that mentorship piece. And that's just my opinion from, the experiences I've had with different mentors who I thought had the results. Later down the line, I find out that that's not the case. Hiring a business coach, we'll leave that out, but you get what I'm saying.
Well, considering the people that I'm starting to learn who are actually listening to this podcast will tend to be business owners. I think everybody who's gone into the coaching space, that's why I'm bringing this up, this element of trust. And, when you really get into this space, like it's a substantial investment. It's not something small, and it is a very worthy substantial investment. If you're going to truly invest in yourself, your health and well-being, there's no greater investment. And sometimes you got to get burned to know enough about yourself that you don't want. On the flip side, what I'm curious about is, aside from obviously, hey, have you done it? Have you kept doing it? Like, have you continued to be this? I think something that's like, how do you see it presented? I think from a language standpoint, because I'm sure you're as similar as I am. I see all the ads in Facebook. I see it in Instagram. It's the same shtick every time, and I hear the scarcity. I hear the blah, 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 like I hear it on fitness, nutrition, on business, all of it. What to you? I guess where in the language does your BS detector say, no, this person passed the test? What do you look for in that? I think that's so important, because if nothing else, and I say this to my clients, like I feel like my job is to put myself out of a job. I'm not supposed to be your crutch for the rest of your life. We could change the relationship, like, you know, you want to be with me because it just happens to be better for you, or you like it because of the community. Others, the relationship changes,
Yeah.
but practically speaking, you don't need me anymore. That's my like, but and part of that is improving their BS detector to say, if I died, how would you be able to replicate some of these things, and how would you look for those? So that's kind of why I'm. That's not kind of. It's exactly why I'm bringing this up, just from your perspective too, as I'm being somebody who spent a good chunk of change on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think for me, it's, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, you know, to the point where it's like once I'm done with their support service, like I won't need them anymore. Like I won't, because I'll be able to have these tools and I'll be able to understand the process, um, to be able to self-sustain this. I think that there's, in my experience, the best like mentors, coaches that I've hired actually have ended up being like the lower ticket stuff where there's like such a high value. Cause I've, and again, from like a consumer standpoint, my last three business coaches were all 5-figure plus investments. And to be honest with you, I have enrolled in these like $7 programs where I've received more value and more information. And so I think it's like this balance, because I'm not saying high ticket programs and mentorship isn't important or can't do it for you. I think really what it comes down to is, one, like trusting yourself and really getting clear on what it is that your desired outcome is and the result that you want. And, is there anything that you can do to move the needle forward? And if it is that like more accountability piece, then, who is it that's going to be a good fit for you? And as far as like, just, I mean, it's hard to say too with, the online space, but you can, just kind of see what their low ticket, free content is all about and really get a feel for who they are as a person. Because, yeah, like you said, the bullshit detector definitely has to be, to some degree, it's got to be on and working with, a lot of the stuff that, because anybody can position themselves as anybody online, right? So I think I, again, go back to, there's a difference between the theory and the applied. So it's like, do they have clients who have had the results? And also, just because they have had that doesn't mean that it's going to work for you, especially when it comes to business. I found it's like there's so many different strategies. So for even people in business, what I was talking to this gal several weeks ago who was asking about business stuff. And I said, the best advice I can give you is to get a clear picture on what you want your day to look like as far as a business owner. Do you want to be on one-on-one calls all day? Do you want your calendar booked out? Do you want to be selling more high ticket, low ticket? Like, what does that ideally look like for you? And get really clear, because there's a lot of people that say, oh, high ticket's the only way to go. And some people say low ticket's the only way to go. I think it can all work. I think it just depends on like what is right for you. And that can go also for fitness and nutrition. There are some people who don't actually desire to have, abs and whatever else. Like get clear on what it is you want, like from that truest, purest state. And then you can peel back on like, okay, well, what is it what support do I need to get there? What do I have on my own? What tools can I, source into from my experience? And then where is it that I need to fill in the gaps between someone who's living it and who has gotten other people results?
I think that was really helpful, especially since you're like, especially I like that you brought up both the low and the high, because I think that's important. But also, which I think is an interesting thing that you brought up, essentially, is branding. How are they continually presenting themselves? Are they like, what's their personal life look like? And I think what you also highlighted there, what do you want your day to day look like? Not enough people ask that, and I'm sure you've seen it. Like, you're supposed to want to have this, and it's your life is supposed to look like that, and everybody says like, and you're a piece of shit if you're in business. It doesn't look like this. Like, this, all of it. I see all that stuff. I go, but I don't want that life. So
Yeah.
why would I feel like shit? Because that's not the life that I want, the way they present it. And I understand certain leveraging points and other stuff. I get that. But I think that was really important. And I think there's a generation now. Are you also a millennial?
Well, I know they label all, I was born in 1990. So is that,
Yeah, millennial.
okay.
Yeah, I am what's considered a geriatric millennial, and I'm only 3 years older. So
Okay. Okay.
I fucking love it.
Yeah, they throw geriatric on top of it. That's
I
great.
fucking love it. Um, our generation is more driven by purpose than we are driven by just stuff. Previous generation stuff was a big marker of success and like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think what you're talking about there, when somebody asks like, "What do you want your day to day look like?" It's a different kind of conversation around purpose. How do you want to feel along the journey? Do you want to feel connected? Do you want to feel like you're only answering calls all day long and just pushing product, or do you want to feel like you have a meaningful connection with the people there and work life balance and feel like you actually know who your kids are and your significant other, like you actually like each other 20 years from now? Like, I don't know, crazy idea. That maybe that's call that the American dream. At least my American dream. I still want to be married to my wife and still love her the same way, or I love her even more deeply 20 years from now. But I don't even know where I was going with that. I just thought what that you brought that up is so meaningful that I don't think enough people consider asking questions like that. So
Yeah. Well, we've been conditioned to, it's like the 8 to 5, right? Most people work or 9 to 5 or whatever your flavor is. And for me, I actually, when I initially started my business, I was in the energy healing space. So I did my calendar would be booked with one-on-one energy healing sessions. And it served its purpose. But really, when I really got down to the bottom of it, I started feeling some resistance around getting on these calls. And it wasn't because I didn't want to serve people, because I love serving people, supporting people, helping people like reach their potential and, stack those wins. I love it. But I think because I went through my own healing journey, there was a part of me that now felt with this newfound knowledge, I had to help other people with it. But it actually, like, there was an expiration date for that for me, at least for now, again, in this season of my business. And so I find myself much more passionate and inspired to show up the way that I've set my business up. And it not only serves my daily life, but it serves my clients. So instead of getting on one-to-one calls, I'll give you an example. So for my fitness and nutrition program, my clients have access in our private app to text and send me voice notes anytime they have a question. Now, for me as a client, I prefer that to, we all have busy lives, right? We all have things going on throughout our day. Rather than stacking my calls for 30 minutes when maybe someone doesn't need a call. I have a new client who just onboarded last weekend, and she was sending me questions while she was at the gym, and I was available. So I do my best, especially for new clients, to respond as quickly as I can. And she was like, "Thank you for your quick responses." Like, had she had to wait in 2 weeks for a Zoom call, she wouldn't have got the support she needed right then. And maybe she would have gotten discouraged on the program. And so, again, getting clear about how you want your day to look like. Do you want to be on one-on-one calls if you're a coach? Do you want to offer immediate support to your clients? Like, what's your business model look like? And that was where I had to get really clear on that, because I was finding when I would look at my day and have, 3 and 4 energy calls, healing calls, that I was like, I was drained by the end of the day. And I just wasn't feeling as inspired as I should have. And not necessarily should, but that, everybody deserves, right, for something like that. And so I released it. And, I think this could be an illustration of, finding what works for you, because yes, I do believe, and it goes back to the conversation of masculine and feminine. So a river without banks is going to flow all over the place. So you need the structure, you need the strategy, but you also need to flow within the strategy. So some people will throw strategy out the window, which I don't recommend, because then it's like, for folks who talk personally, this is just my personal opinion, who are like, "Oh, I'm intuitively eating." Cool, but do you know how much you're eating a day? Like, if you don't have physique goals and you don't have certain goals, okay, like if you have the luxury of just floating around, fine. But again, it's like when we have the structure, then we bring in the map and we bring in, what it is that we're actually choosing, and then we can flow within the structure. So that's like with macros, you can still, choose to eat what your body's asking for, but you're doing it from a more conscious place. And so I feel that it like kind of circles back to that conversation around needing that strategy and structure, but finding what works for you so that you can actually feel good about it and inspired about it. Might not always be easy, but at least you have the blueprint for the result or the thing that you're wanting to create.
That was a beautiful illustration. I really liked that. That is for sure going to be one of the teaser clips
Oh, good.
because I think it very beautifully, like I had the image in my head, like, oh, that really works. That really works. Wow. Yeah. I think too many people get so dogmatic about like this is the way, but sometimes you do need a little bit of other thing to round it out. And that's so important. And no, I mean, it's also knowing when and how to use the tool. That's
Mhm.
also important. Like, what if you don't have your scale with you? Like, could you estimate? Could you do? But of course, if you've measured and weighed, and you know, I both know this, like, you get pretty good at choosing. Like, this is 4 ounces of
Yeah.
turkey. I
Yep.
know, and you're always like within maybe zero point 0.1 gram, and you're like, and that was just picking it up in your hand. You're like, you know, I think of like butchers all the time. I'm like, they could just look at something, be like, that is for sure like 8 ounces, 6 ounces, just like by looking at it. I'm like, but you do that enough in your life, of course you know. Like it's automatic because you feel it in your hands. All right, let's pivot. I'm loving where all this stuff is going, but I am taking a look at the time and I want to be respectful of your time. 3 fun questions. I should have told you we were going to do this before we started.
I love one question.
3 fun questions. This is my way of trying to make it more fun and fun in the sense of like, and I won't call it trivia. Anyway, let's jump right in. Question number one: what sports or creative activities did you play when you were younger, and how did you play them? So to give you context around this, like I played lacrosse, I was a captain, I played a lot of midi, I played certain types of positions on the field, blah, 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 blah. That kind of concept.
Got it. In high school, well, before high school, I played basketball and volleyball. So I was a point guard on the basketball team and loved that. Did that up through high school. Didn't end up playing in college. And then same with volleyball. I was I went to a small school, so we actually played all the way around, but primarily I was an outside hitter. But those were the two sports that I played growing up. And then as I've gotten in my older years, I do, it's considered a sport, but I'm a bikini bodybuilder, bikini athlete. And then I've done a little boxing just for fun. So always loving to stay active. And I guess bodybuilding's my current sport of choice.
Hmm. So the reason why I asked this question, because there was, of course, going to be some depth behind it.
Yeah, I was like, here we go.
Here we go. I took a course in college when I was studying kinesiology, and one of the elements of the course was on play. SUNY Cortland is a big P, like one of the best PE schools in the country, if not the world. Excuse me. And I kind of threw it by the wayside, namely because I struggle personally with like free form play. I like a game, I like a sport, and I especially like it within team structures. I like points. I like to win. Um, what they shared in that was like it's how people play is indicative of how they problem solve and how they go about things. So what I found was interesting, point guard is somebody who facilitates the structure and the form of the game. Like this is the game plan. The ball comes through me, and then I distribute it. And I think something, of course, I don't know much about volleyball, but I thought of the point guard thing. I think basketball is I think it's one of the most highly athletic games on the planet because there's so much fluidity and it's constant and it's beautiful in that regard. But now I think about you as a professional, form and a function, but through your clients, you are facilitating structure, function, and form, and you're modeling it for other people. I thought that was just really cool to see. Hey, it never really went away. It's always been there. We just go back and we look at some of those things.
I love
So
it. Calling the plays. Good stuff.
you're calling the plays. It's exactly what it is. You said outside hitter. Is that volleyball?
Yeah, volleyball was my secondary sport. Basketball was definitely my primary.
Okay,
So, but yes.
cool. Very cool. Well, you had two. You still have the spiritual. You have the other, like, Otis,
Yep.
like you still have these two elements of yourself, which I think is very cool.
Oh yeah, I definitely can't remove the spiritual aspects.
Which I thought was funny when I came on the podcast and you're like, this is what we're going to talk about. I'm like, let's be real. I got a feeling we're going to kind of just lean into this other shit too,
Yeah.
which is,
Well, I had
which is
taken
cool.
a big break off my show because my dog was sick and stuff was going on. And I was just like, I need a minute. And it was shortly after I'd released the energy work from my offerings, but it's still infused into what I do. It's just different.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's important because knowing who you're trying to support, plus when it's a practical problem to solve, it's pretty easy to measure. Like, are we making progress or are we not? When it's like, I just feel and I'm manifesting and I'm a like that field is and been there, done that. Like that's a hard field and I plenty of people do a great job in it, but
Yeah.
some and
Yeah.
I've struggled with similar
That's
stuff.
for a whole
Anyway,
nother episode, right? The spiritual field.
and that's a whole nother ball of wax. And it's not the problem is it's not wrong. It's
Yeah.
hard to measure.
Yeah.
And most people have a very, very limited patience and like can't sit still for 4 minutes, like let alone think a year from now how quality life is going to change from something that is emotional and spiritual basis. And they can't like just put their finger on it every single day. It's like I'm just happy that bad things didn't happen. Like, that's different. But you had to know what bad things felt. It's a whole different ball of wax.
Yeah. Whole different ballgame.
Yeah. Question number 2. You're stranded on a desert island for the rest of your life. What movie and show are you bringing with you and why?
What movie and show?
Yeah, so you can bring a movie and a TV show.
Does the TV show continue to bring on episodes or am I stuck with whatever is?
I mean, I guess whatever show,
Okay.
if there's a show going right now that hasn't ended, like, and you want to gamble on it, and there's going to be like infinite, sure, you
Okay.
can knock yourself out. But
Okay.
as of what you know, let's go
Okay.
with that.
Well, I'm for sure you're going to appreciate this one. I'm for sure bringing Step Brothers because you can watch that movie unlimited times and you're still going to come up with funny shit that you're like, I never heard that before, even though I watched this movie like 50 times. And that's a solid one that you can watch at least several times a year and be fine. So I'm definitely going to bring Step Brothers. The TV show is a tough one because currently I'm into, have you ever seen The Rookie? I really like that show. It's a cop show. It's a little bit newer. It's kind of funny. From being in law enforcement, like half the stuff that goes on in that show, I'm like, this is totally not real life, but it's kind of silly. Like it's so my current favorite show, probably that one. If we're going like back, I did really love the show One Tree Hill. I've watched that a couple times. So my girly show. But I watched that
What?
several times through.
Okay, so what about One Tree Hill? It really hit. The Rookie seems obvious. My wife loved that show, by the way, and I would
Yeah.
roll my eyes every time she put it. I'm like, this again? Here we
The
go.
Rookie?
Like the Rookie. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. What about One Tree Hill hit for you?
One Tree Hill, so that one is about a group of high school students, and it just shows like the ins and outs, like the challenges they went through, the drama, the love stories, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I was always just really entertained by that show. And I feel like it would pass the time if I was stuck on a desert island.
I love how your answers to this are way more practical, which is interesting in your shift in life right now. Like, but one thing I have found, especially with coaches who have evolved a lot and people who just mature in life in general, at least one thing that I've noticed, and every time anybody's answered this, is that something with comedy. They're always like, I got to have a comedy. I got to be able to laugh. And especially we're thinking Desert Island. If you can't laugh at some of the shitty moments in life, even like almost to find a way to be, like we talked about before, being grateful for the shitty things that happened. I think that there's such a maturity behind that. So I thought that was an interesting part of like yeah. Plus, Step Brothers just hilarious. But then obviously the Rookie being something that resonates with some element of your life. So that was
Yeah.
pretty cool. I asked that because I think it took a long time for me to appreciate that we can learn a lot and like understand what's going on in the stories that we continually engage in. So I'm always curious, like what is somebody drawn to? Like, do they just put something on to just pass the time? Is there something that is depth behind the story that makes them feel something? That's where I'm going. Number 3, the final one, your deathbed meal. So what is your deathbed meal and who are you sharing it with and why for both of those?
Hmm. And I only get to share with one person.
You can answer it however you'd like. I answer these. I really
Well,
you ask,
I know
I
I'm
love
like
how you.
very analytical. I'm like, so what are the rules on this? I need all the rules. I need all the information here before I can make a decision. Okay, so I would share the last meal with my man Luke for sure. And whenever we go out to eat, our thing is steakhouses. So Mastro Steakhouse in Southern California is one of my favorites. And I don't know if you're a filet mignon person, but the 12-ounce filet, cooked medium, little blue cheese crumble on top. We got the scalloped potatoes and some asparagus. Like that's our go-to. That's like a treat meal for us because it's like we're still getting the meat. So, definitely going to be a little high in the fats because they slop some butter on it. Maybe I'll track it. Maybe I won't. I don't know. If it's my last meal, I don't know if it really matters. Although I could, take that to my grave here. Track macros on my last meal. And then you got the scalloped potatoes, which they just do. Oh my gosh. If you ever come to Southern California, you got to go to Mastro's Steakhouse. The one in Newport's nice. You got to make a reservation for that. So I don't know if I get to actually go there from on my deathbed, but that'd be my last meal for sure.
You're the only person who's done all those extra caveat. Do you do that a lot, just like in work or like with Luke? Do you just like, well, how does it have to be? So this, like, are you?
Yeah.
That reminded me of my wife a lot, right there. It's like, well, what are the rules of this thing? Like, I have to
Yeah.
understand all the little things and the. Okay,
Yeah. That's yeah. I'm like, I need to know what the fine print is, please.
you are
But I
far
also am
better.
the type of person that once I have the information, like I'm not going to be convinced either way or another. Like I know if I need something, then I'm like, I'm in. Or if it's not for me, I'm like, yeah, no. And no amount of like coercion or, whatever is going to make me change my mind.
You're so sweet, and I love it. So I'll tell you why I asked that question. I believe uh, world peace is going to be solved one family dinner at a time. All of our problems stem from the beginning. Like, what was our first God figures? What was our first community like? It is our family. And like, I have learned in my own life and coming full circle with a lot of things in my own family. When all my issues were representations of things that I didn't resolve within my family. And as I have taken ownership and leadership within my family, I noticed there's an Apple emoji giving thumbs up. Good job, Caleb. I've noticed the other things, and I'm also the eldest, so I believe like I'm in a very interesting like middle, same way with the geriatric millennial. I'm between the generations in a lot of things. Where I'm going with this, again, I believe that like that's where we're going to solve world peace. But secondarily, we talked about this before, changing somebody's diet, it's like changing their religion. The culture, the things you value, things you care about shows up on the plate. So I find that really interesting within that. And you just described like, maybe I'll track it, maybe I won't. Is that to me to the end? Like, I thought that was the cutest thing ever. But the final piece, and perhaps I've shared this with you, but I wrote a speech a few years ago for my brother's wedding that I officiated, and it was titled The Window and the Mirror. And there's a saying, the eyes are the windows to the soul. I also believe they're also the mirror. And I believe the person, if we have the choice, who's on our deathbed, is the person who is the reflection of the furthest growth towards our full potential and our purpose in our lifetime. And they are showing you that in just being there and being present. So, if nothing else, where maybe you go with that tonight is some reflections about what he has been for you and what he's showing you about yourself. Because I know when I feel lost, I look at my wife and I go, why does she believe? Why does she love me? And I remember like that's the only thing. That's literally the only thing I need to focus on. Because if I want her on my deathbed, I should probably just figure out what it is right now so that I can continue to deepen and strengthen all that along the way. That part of the soapbox rant is over. I don't know how you think about all that, but I'd
I
love to get
love
you.
that. I'm gonna get all like emotional. I love that so much. All
Make
of
it Sunday. Let's make it Sunday. We can get emotional anytime.
so good.
Undercurrent of all that, that was my little way of sharing how I appreciate and sharing time with others. So when my father worked a lot when I was younger, and he would travel a lot, whatever. But and we didn't say like I love you a lot. That's changed in my adult relationship. But when I was younger, he did it. I always knew I was loved. But he would take me out once every 4 to 6 weeks, whatever it was, something like that. We'd have a boys' night, and we'd go to Sports Authority, maybe buy some sports shit. We're talking like, I don't even think Sports Authority exists anymore.
It doesn't, but I love Sports Authority. I used to get all my gear there.
Let's go, girl. I know we're
Oh
friends.
yeah,
That's
I
just
remember
that.
Sports Authority. Now I think it's Dick's Sporting Goods, at least around here for us.
Same here. Yeah, up in Albany, that's what it is, or Albany area. The second thing we would do was go catch a bite to eat. Usually get a steak. So I resonated very much with what you were saying there. Oh, and catch a movie. So that was my way of always feeling connected, and it's my way of sharing that with you right now. So a
Aw.
little extra love within all the things. So
Yeah, so good.
looking at the time, if somebody's listening right now and they're like, yo, I dig this gal, Amanda, and I need more of her in my life, what would be the best way for somebody to connect with you?
Oh, probably my two places, my Instagram or my website, which are both my name. So Amanda, then my last name, Monnier. Easy, easy.
Stop making my life so easy. For anybody who doesn't know that and didn't type it out, didn't write it out, or too lazy to do that, don't worry. Go to the show notes. I promise you it will be there. And you can just click and it will go there nice and easy peasy. Um, before we go, what would be the final words of wisdom you'd like to share with our audience today?
Oh, that's always a tough one too, because we covered so many things and I could go so many directions. But really what I'm sensing and what's coming through is just get really clear on the ways in which like your daily habits aren't actually reflecting who you truly are and who you came here to be. And it doesn't have to be all at once, but it can be small incremental changes each day. And so just getting clear on, I'll give you an example. So it could be something so seemingly small as, oh, I've always wanted to do this thing. And that happened when I had for years been like, I just always wanted to do a bikini show. And then I woke up one morning and I was like, well, Amanda, there's a difference between wanting to do it and actually choosing to do it, even if it's a little messy and you don't think you know what you're doing. And you just start taking those daily steps toward those things that you are here to do, be, experience, and have. So if you're waking up and you're not feeling inspired about the life that you're living and your current reality, it's simply a reflection of like the choices you've made the months, years prior. So you can start making changes today on whatever it is that you are here to create, be, do, have, experience. And there's not really, it's like, it's not right or wrong. So you get to choose that, you get to create it, but you have to be clear on it so that, you know what you're moving towards. We talked about the structure and the flow. So both are equally as important. And if you are having challenges doing it on your own, like don't be afraid to find someone that you resonate with and trust to help you on that journey. A coach, a mentor, a friend, like someone who's in your corner. And, this process might also require releasing things from your old life. And that could be friends, that could be habits, are not in alignment with that. And that's part of the process as well. So embrace that uncomfortability because it's not all sunshine and rainbows, but the experience of it is oftentimes on the other side of that uncomfortable stuff that might come up during the process. So, but you got this.
That was a beautiful reflection to close this thing out. And yeah, so we're gonna leave it at that. Thank you, Amanda. You're awesome. Love you
Thank you.
tons. I can't wait till I get to meet you in person one day. I'd love to meet your boyfriend as well. Like,
I
sounds
know,
like an
don't
awesome
date.
guy. Yeah, double date. Where are you gonna? Are you in California? Can't
I'm
remember
in
where you're.
Southern California. Yeah.
Well, my sister lives in Southern California, so maybe I'll go out and visit and double up and have
Yeah.
all the good times together. It'll be
Yeah.
great.
So good.
Everybody, make sure you go connect with Amanda. She is fantastic. Obviously, just listen to all the greatness that just is spiraling around in her mind, but she clearly has a structure and a method and a way to all of those beautiful things to help serve you. Love you tons. And until next time, I remind you to love everybody.